The rain came down in sheets, the kind that blurred everything but the sound. It was deafening. The sky had turned black in a matter of minutes, and the old dog sat alone under a dying street lamp, shivering against the cold. Its fur, once a deep golden brown, was matted with dirt and soaked through. There was no one left in the alley to help. Only echoes of what was once a busy street, now abandoned under the weight of the storm. The dog's eyes, wide and glossy, reflected fear, an unmistakable terror that had long since worn the softness from its spirit. It had been left here discarded, just like so many others. It had nowhere to go, no one to turn to. Just a heartbeat away from giving up hope, the sound of a car's tires sloshing through the puddles broke the silence, and the dog's ears perked up. Maybe, just maybe, this time it would be different. This time it would find a savior, even if it had to wait until the very last moment. The alley smelled like wet asphalt and something sour, a lingering scent of discarded trash left too long in the rain. The old dog had learned not to mind the smell anymore. It had learned to survive on the scraps that fell from the hands of those too busy to notice it. A half-eaten burger, a sandwich tossed out of a car window, the occasional kindness of a passing soul. But today, the dog sat still, eyes fixed on the ground. Its heart heavy with a weight it couldn't place. It had been too many days now, too many nights of freezing rain, and now there was nothing left to eat. It felt the sting of hunger more keenly, more painfully, in its chest. The light from the street lamp flickered faintly, casting long, wavering shadows over its frail form. The dog's fur was matted, clumped together by rainwater and grime. Its breath came in shallow pants, its ribs visible under the thick fur, ribs that had seen too much hunger. It was always hungry. It had been for as long as it could remember. The feeling was as constant as the beat of its heart. But now, with the rain coming down harder, pounding relentlessly on the ground, it had never felt more alone. A sharp sound pierced the silence, the screech of tires against wet roads. The dog's ears perked up, and it lifted its head, squinting through the downpour. Was it someone? Someone who might offer help, or at least something to eat. But no one had stopped before. No one had ever cared enough to stop for it. But this time, there was a figure. A man, just a shadow at first, standing near the end of the alley, his figure vaguely lit by the streetlight. The man stood there, unmoving, for what felt like an eternity. The dog watched him, heart racing in its chest, unsure if it should move or stay hidden. The rain continued to pour, soaking the ground, but for a brief moment, it felt like the storm outside wasn't the only thing that had begun to change. The man took a step toward the dog, his feet splashing through the puddles. The dog's instincts told it to run, to hide, but its body was too tired. Instead, it remained where it was, frozen in place, as the stranger slowly approached. "Hey there, little one." The man's voice was gentle, but firm, the kind of voice that would not be ignored. "You hungry?" The dog's tail twitched slightly, but it didn't move. Its eyes followed the stranger's every movement, distrust clouding the blue of its gaze. The man crouched, lowering himself to the dog's level. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small piece of meat, warm and glistening under the dim light. "I'm not going to hurt you," the man said softly, his voice a little shaky. "I just want to help." The dog, though hesitant, could smell the warmth of the meat, the tantalizing scent that flooded its senses. It wanted to trust, it really did, but its past had taught it to fear. It had been abandoned before, left in dark alleys to fend for itself. It had learned not to trust kindness because it was always fleeting, always temporary. But there was something about this stranger, something that softened the walls of fear, just enough for the dog to move a little closer. Its nose twitched as it sniffed the air, and then, slowly, cautiously, it inched toward the man. "Good," the man whispered, his voice thick with relief. "That's a good boy." The dog hesitated, the fear still clawing at its heart. But it took the food from the man's outstretched hand, its teeth trembling as it gnawed on the meat. For a brief moment, there was peace, a fleeting moment where the hunger and loneliness didn't feel quite so sharp. The dog ate, its belly finally satisfied for the first time in what felt like ages. And yet, when the meal was finished, the stranger stood up and turned away, walking back toward the street. The dog's eyes followed him, a flicker of panic in its chest. Was he leaving? Was this just another fleeting moment of kindness that would slip through its pores, like all the others? But this time, something shifted. Something deep inside the dog, a flicker of hope, fragile and small but real. For the first time in years, it had been seen, really seen. The stranger hadn't just walked past it. He had stopped. He had offered something, even if it was just food, even if it was just for a moment. The dog watched the man disappear into the rain, a part of it unsure, but another part of it, one that had been buried so deep for so long, started to believe. Days passed. Every night, the dog waited in the alley. Each time, it heard the soft footsteps of the stranger, followed by the scent of food. And each time, the dog grew a little braver. It began to approach the man faster, until one day, it allowed itself to be petted, something it had never done before. The man's hands were warm, steady, and gentle. The dog could feel the comfort in them, feel the kindness that had once seemed so foreign. But trust wasn't something the dog could give away so easily. Every time the stranger left, a pang of fear gnawed at its insides. What if the man never came back? What if this was just another trick? The man, however, never gave up. He kept coming back, and slowly, bit by bit, the dog's walls began to crumble. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden light across the wet streets, the man reached his hand out to the dog. This time, the dog didn't hesitate. It walked toward him, closer than it had ever dared before, and then, in a quiet, life-changing moment, the dog followed him home. There was still fear lingering in the corners of the dog's heart, but it was softer now. It had found a place where it could finally rest, where it could feel safe, not just for a moment, but for as long as it needed. The man's home smelled of warm food and fresh sheets, two things the dog had never known before. The warmth of the hearth, the gentle glow of the lamps, and the quiet hum of life were a new kind of peace. The dog looked up at the man, who was smiling down at it, and for the first time in a long time, its eyes were not filled with fear. They were filled with something else, hope. And with that hope came trust. The dog curled up at the foot of the man's bed, feeling something it had never felt before, truly loved. The storm had passed, and with it, the dog had found its home. The house was quiet that night. The rain had finally stopped, leaving only the soft tap of droplets falling from the trees outside. The dog lay in its new bed, its body finally relaxed for the first time in what felt like forever. The warmth of the fire crackled softly in the corner, and the faint scent of the man's cologne lingered in the air. For the first time in a long time, the dog closed its eyes and let sleep take over, the kind of sleep that wasn't interrupted by nightmares or the fear of waking up alone. In the safety of this new place, it found peace. But peace didn't come easily. The next morning, the dog woke early, a quiet alarm inside its chest reminding it that nothing in life was permanent. It still remembered the cold of the alley, the empty stomachs, the nights when no one cared. The dog's eyes darted around the room, its body stiffening, as if waiting for some sign that this new reality was too good to be true. The man noticed the hesitation in the dog's movements. He didn't say anything at first, but there was a look in his eyes, concerned but patient. He understood the weight of what the dog had gone through. It wasn't just hunger or cold that haunted the dog. It was the deeper scars, the betrayal of being abandoned. The man crouched down in front of the dog, his hand extended once again, this time slower, more deliberate. The dog, unsure, stood up, eyes locked on the man's face. But instead of retreating, it leaned in closer, just a fraction of an inch, its breath quick, shallow. "You don't have to be afraid anymore," the man whispered, his voice soft, like a promise. "I'm not going anywhere." And for the first time, the dog believed him. The soft touch of the man's hand on its head, the reassurance in his words, it melted the last of the fear. The dog leaned into the touch, allowing the warmth to spread through its body, feeling safe, for real this time. The man smiled, his face showing the same quiet relief. "Good boy," he murmured. "You're home now." Days turned into weeks. The dog learned the rhythm of this new life, a life that wasn't defined by scarcity and pain. Each morning, it woke to the smell of fresh coffee brewing, the clink of dishes being set on the kitchen table, the soft hum of the man moving around the house. There were no more cold streets, no more nights spent shivering in the darkness. There was only the sound of the man's footsteps, always coming back to the dog, and in the quiet moments, when the world outside the window was still and calm, the dog would look up at the man and see something it had never seen before. Genuine affection, a bond that went beyond just the physical act of feeding and caring. There was a tenderness between them, a connection built slowly, with trust that grew each day. The dog had learned to love again, and with that love came a new kind of strength. But the healing wasn't finished. Not yet. There were still moments when the dog would startle at loud noises, or when it would back away from the man's hand in fear. And the man knew these moments were normal. He knew it would take time. Healing wasn't a straight line after all. There were setbacks, moments of doubt, but there were also small victories that showed just how far they'd come. One afternoon, as the dog and the man sat on the porch, watching the sun begin to dip below the horizon, the dog nudged its head into the man's lap, something it had never done before. The man's hand slowly stroked the dog's fur, and for the first time, there was no tension, no hesitation. It was just the two of them, sitting in the peace of the evening. "Thank you," the man said quietly, his voice almost lost in the wind, "for trusting me." The dog's tail gave a small, contented wag, a silent answer that spoke louder than words ever could. It had found a place to belong, a place to rest, and most importantly, a place to heal. The seasons changed, and with each new day, the dog grew stronger, more confident. It learned to walk alongside the man without fear, to lie by the fire and let its body sink into the warmth. It even found itself running through the yard, chasing after sticks, feeling the cool air rush through its fur. It had begun to trust in the world again, to trust in the man who had shown it kindness when the world had shown it nothing but cruelty. But the most significant change wasn't just in the dog's physical appearance. The dog's eyes had changed too. The wide, fearful gaze that once saw only threat and abandonment had softened. It was now filled with trust, gratitude, and a quiet sense of belonging. The man, too, had changed. The dog's presence in his life had opened something inside of him. A part of his heart he hadn't realized was there, waiting to be unlocked. The two of them had found something in each other, something deeper than either could have imagined. And so, as the years passed, the dog and the man continued their journey together. There were still quiet moments of uncertainty, times when fear would slip back in, but they faced those moments together. And each time, they proved to each other that nothing, no storm, no moment of doubt, could break the bond they shared. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the world around them quieted, the dog sat beside the man on the porch, looking out at the world they had built together. The sky was a beautiful, soft pink, the colors of the day fading into night. The dog's eyes, once full of fear, were now calm, steady. There was no more running, no more hiding. There was only the present, only this moment of peace, and the understanding that this was home. And that was enough. In the distance, a single star flickered against the darkening sky. It was as if the universe, too, had found a way to smile. The dog lay its head in the man's lap and closed its eyes, the rhythm of their breaths slow and steady, a quiet symphony of contentment. In that moment, there was no more fear, no more struggle. There was only love. And for the first time, the dog knew it would never be alone again. As time passed, the seasons turned, each one adding another layer to the story of the man and the dog. The harsh winters melted into warm, golden summers, and with every passing day, the bond between them grew deeper. Their life together, once defined by survival and uncertainty, now found its roots in peace and understanding. The dog began to show its true nature, its playful side that had once been buried beneath the weight of neglect. It would chase after the man's shadow as he worked in the garden, bounding through the tall grass with uncontained joy, the sun casting a warm glow on its fur. The man would laugh, a deep, sincere sound that filled the air, and in those moments, the dog felt more alive than it ever had before. But there were still moments of quiet reflection, moments where the dog would sit by the window and gaze out into the world beyond the yard. It was no longer the fearful creature it had once been, but every so often, The dog would catch a flicker of something, a distant memory of the alleyway, the cold, the hunger. It would pause, its ears flicking slightly, as if the shadows of the past still whispered at the edges of its mind. The man noticed these moments, but he didn't rush the dog. He understood. Healing, he knew, wasn't a destination but a journey, a series of moments strung together. And together they would face whatever memories still lingered, one step at a time. One afternoon, the man decided to take the dog to the park. It had been a while since they had ventured beyond the comfort of their home, and the world outside was calling to them. The man opened the door, and the dog, as if sensing the change in the air, trotted toward him, its tail wagging with excitement. Outside, the world felt fresh, untouched by the weight of time. The grass was green and dewy, the trees rustling in the soft breeze, and the sun hung high in the sky, casting long shadows across the park. The dog's nose twitched as it inhaled the scents of the earth, the flowers, the promise of something new. It was here, in the vast open space, that the dog finally felt free. The leash the man had attached was a mere formality. The dog wasn't confined by it, not really. It ran with abandon, its paws kicking up the earth as it leaped over fallen branches, its body full of energy and vitality. The man followed at a slower pace, his heart light, watching his dog run with such joy it seemed almost too much to contain. For a long while they ran together, side by side, heart and soul. The dog would pause occasionally, looking back at the man with a questioning gaze, as if to ask, "Are you coming?" The man, with a smile on his face, would nod, and the dog would continue its chase, faster and faster, as if it had no limits. It was in that moment, as the dog raced through the open park, that the man realized just how far they had come. The dog, once trembling with fear, now ran with such strength, such energy. It was a symbol of everything they had both overcome. The struggles, the doubts, the pain of the past. The dog paused on the edge of the park, panting heavily, its eyes scanning the open field before it. It looked back at the man, who stood still, taking in the view. There was a silent understanding between them. Together, they had built something that no storm could ever take away. The dog trotted back to the man, its pace slowing, the joy of the chase still evident in its steps. The man knelt down, his hand gently brushing the dog's fur, and for the first time, there was no tension in the dog's body, no fear. It was just pure, untainted love, a bond that couldn't be broken. The dog sat by the man's feet, its head resting against his leg, its eyes soft, content. There was no need for words. In the stillness of that moment, with the park stretching out before them, and the soft rustling of the trees in the background, the dog knew that this was where it belonged. No longer lost, no longer abandoned. Here it had found home. And so, life continued for the man and the dog, a life filled with love, trust, and the simple joys of being together. The dog learned to embrace the world around it, no longer looking back with longing, but looking forward, excited for the days to come. The man, too, had found something he hadn't expected: purpose, fulfillment, and a love so deep that it reshaped his life. The bond between them wasn't just about saving the dog. It was about healing each other, growing together in ways neither had anticipated. They had become each other's refuge, a home built not on walls or roofs, but on shared experiences, quiet moments, and the knowledge that they would always have each other. There were no more dark alleys, no more empty nights alone. There was only the warmth of their shared moments, the quiet companionship that spoke volumes without a single word. And as the sun dipped low on another evening, casting a golden light across the yard, the dog sat once more by the man's side, its fur soft in the fading light. The world was wide, and yet, in this small, peaceful corner, it felt like everything had come full circle. The dog's tail gave a soft, satisfied wag, as if to say, "This is it. This is home." The man looked down at his companion, his heart full, and the two of them sat together, watching the stars begin to twinkle in the sky above. The storm had passed. The journey from fear to love had come to its end, and in its place there was peace. For the first time, the dog could rest without fear. The man, too, could rest, and together they had found the home they both deserved. The days drifted by, each one blending into the next, like the slow and steady rhythm of a peaceful heart. The seasons cycled, just as they always had, but for the man and the dog, it felt as if time had taken on a new meaning. It was no longer measured by the moments of struggle, the gaps of uncertainty that once loomed so large. Now every day held a sense of quiet triumph. The dog had come into its own, no longer the scared creature it once was, but a partner in life, its body strong, its spirit unbroken. It woke each morning with energy, eager to face the day with the man who had become its world. There were no more late nights spent huddled in corners, no more searching for warmth in places that offered none. The warmth now came from within, born out of trust, forged by time and shared moments of tenderness. And the man who had once carried the weight of his own doubts found himself light in a way he hadn't imagined possible. The bond he had formed with the dog had unlocked something deep within him, a tenderness, a quiet strength he hadn't known he possessed. In caring for the dog, he had learned how to care for himself, how to heal the scars he hadn't even realized were there. They were both healing, growing together, and in doing so, they created something beautiful, a home built not just with bricks and walls, but with love, patience, and understanding. But even in the comfort of their new life, the shadows of the past lingered at the edges, soft and lingering. There were still moments when the dog would hesitate at a loud noise, a sudden movement, or a shift in the air. It would freeze for a split second, as if waiting for something to come rushing back, and the man would be there, always, his hand on the dog's head, grounding it back in the present, reminding it that there was nothing to fear anymore. And each time, the dog would look up at him, its eyes softening, a silent understanding passing between them. It was no longer the frightened animal it had been. It had found its strength in the safety of the man's presence, in the quiet assurance that it was no longer alone. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of purple and orange, the man stood by the window, watching the dog in the yard. The dog had grown so much, physically, emotionally, and it now carried itself with a confidence that came only from knowing it was loved. The dog was playing with a ball, running in circles, its tail wagging furiously as it darted through the grass. The man smiled, his heart swelling at the sight. It wasn't just the dog's transformation that filled him with pride. It was the journey they had shared, the quiet, unspoken promise that they had made to each other. Through every challenge, every moment of doubt, they had come through stronger. And in that moment the man knew, with a certainty that ran deep within him, that this was the life he had been meant to live. He had found his purpose, his peace, and it was here in the quiet companionship of the dog, who had once been lost. Just as he had once been lost, the dog paused, sensing the man's gaze. It turned, locking eyes with him, its face breaking into the kind of expression that could only be described as joy. It trotted over to him, the ball still clutched in its mouth, and dropped it at the man's feet. The man bent down, scooping the ball into his hand, and as he looked into the dog's eyes, something inside of him shifted. The weight of the past, the things he had carried for so long, suddenly felt lighter. "You're not alone anymore," the man whispered, more to himself than to the dog. But the dog, ever perceptive, seemed to hear him, its ears perking up as it gave a soft bark, its eyes gleaming with the trust that had taken so long to build. In the silence that followed, the world felt perfect, imperfectly perfect. The man tossed the ball into the air, and the dog dashed after it, a blur of motion, of life, of joy. The sound of the dog's paws hitting the ground echoed in the stillness, and for the first time, the man allowed himself to truly relax, to let go of the doubts that had once weighed him down. The years that followed were simple, yet full. The man and the dog spent their days together in the small moments. Long walks in the park, quiet evenings by the fire, early mornings spent watching the sunrise. They didn't need much, just each other, and that was enough. The dog continued to flourish, its coat shining in the sunlight, its eyes always alight with love. And the man, with each passing year, found himself more content than he had ever been. There were no grand declarations, no dramatic shifts. There was only the steady, quiet understanding that they were exactly where they were meant to be. But even in the simplicity of their life, there were moments that would stay with them forever. The soft brush of the dog's head against the man's leg as they sat on the porch, the gentle rhythm of the dog's breathing as it slept at the foot of the man's bed, the sound of its bark echoing through the house, filling it with life. One autumn evening, the man sat in the yard, watching the leaves fall, the last remnants of summer drifting away. The dog sat by his side, its head resting gently on his lap. The sun was low in the sky, casting a golden glow over everything. As the man stroked the dog's fur, he felt a profound sense of peace. They had been through so much together, and yet, in this moment, there was nothing left to fear. There was only love, quiet, steady, unconditional love. The dog looked up at the man, its eyes filled with a deep, understanding gaze. It was as if it knew what the man was thinking, knew that this moment was the culmination of everything they had gone through. It nuzzled closer to him, its body warm against his, and the man smiled, his heart full. In that moment, they didn't need to speak. They didn't need to say anything at all. The bond they shared was enough. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in shades of pink and gold, the dog sighed softly, content. The storm had passed. The journey had been long, but they had made it through, together. And in the quiet embrace of the evening, the dog and the man found the peace they had both been searching for. Together they had found home. As the days passed, life grew quieter, more peaceful. The world outside was ever changing, but in the small yard, beneath the shade of the old oak tree, everything felt perfectly still. The dog, no longer the trembling, fearful creature it once was, ran joyfully across the yard, chasing after the ball the man had tossed. Its paws, once so hesitant, now struck the ground with confidence, its body strong, its tail wagging in unbridled happiness. Every leap, every bound, carried the weight of the transformation it had undergone. The man sat on the porch, watching the dog play. There was a deep sense of contentment in the stillness, a quiet knowing that their bond had blossomed into something rare, something beautiful. He had found peace in the dog's unwavering loyalty, in the small moments of tenderness they shared, whether it was the dog resting its head on his lap after a long day or their silent companionship as they watched the sunset together. There was no grand gesture, no need for words, just the simple, unspoken understanding that they were exactly where they needed to be. And yet, there were still those quiet moments when the past tried to resurface, when the dog would freeze in place, eyes wide, its body tense, as though it could still hear the echoes of its painful history. The man would always be there, gentle and patient, offering comfort and assurance. Slowly, with each passing day, those moments became fewer and farther between. The dog had learned that it was safe, that it was loved, that it would never again face the darkness alone. The seasons changed, the cold winter winds giving way to the warmth of spring. The flowers bloomed in the garden. The air smelled of fresh grass and earth, and life continued, gentle and steady. The man would spend hours tending to the garden, his hands moving through the soil, while the dog stayed by his side, always close, always watching. It was during these moments, when the world was so still, that the man realized how much he had grown too. Caring for the dog, loving it, had opened something deep within him, something that had long been buried beneath the layers of his own pain, his own loneliness. But the dog had changed him in ways that words could never capture. It had taught him patience, compassion, and the beauty of second chances. Together, they had found something pure, a bond forged not in the absence of struggle, but in the overcoming of it. The dog had come to him broken, lost, but it had found its way back to itself through his care. And in doing so, it had shown him that love, in all its forms, was the ultimate healing force. One crisp autumn evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of purple and orange, the man sat on the porch, the dog nestled at his feet. The quiet of the evening enveloped them like a blanket, the world outside seeming miles away. The man reached down and gently stroked the dog's fur, a familiar comfort that had become so ingrained in their routine. The dog's eyes were soft, calm, no longer filled with the uncertainty of its past. Its gaze held only peace now, a peacefulness that matched the tranquility of the evening. In the stillness, the man allowed himself to reflect on the journey they had taken together. The fears, the uncertainties, the growth, and the love that had emerged from it all. There were no words to capture the depth of what they had shared, no way to express the gratitude that swelled in his chest. But in the quiet moments like this one, he didn't need to say anything. The dog, sensing the man's quiet reflection, let out a soft sigh, resting its head against his leg, a gesture of trust that spoke volumes. And the man smiled, his heart full. In that one simple act, in the unspoken connection they shared, he knew that everything had come full circle. The journey they had both been on, the dog's path from fear to trust, and his own path from solitude to companionship, had led them here, to this peaceful evening. The world may have been full of noise, full of chaos, but in this moment everything was still. They had found each other when they needed it most, and in each other, they had found a kind of healing that could not be found anywhere else. As the final rays of the sun slipped below the horizon, the man leaned back in his chair, the dog still at his feet, and closed his eyes for a moment. The world was quiet, and in that silence he felt something profound, the simple, unspoken truth that this was home. Together, they had found their place in the world, and it was enough.